Okay. Welcome to this episode of the Learning Vibes podcast. My name is Dr. Annie Ranking, and I am one of the co-hosts of this podcast. And my co-host is Dr. Dave Knowlton. Dave, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Annie, and we're going to play today. It's going to be all about play.
That is so exciting. Yeah, as an early childhood professional, play is at the core of what I'm doing and how I'm helping teachers and how I'm really engaging with adults. So I'm really excited to hear about the conversation we have about play with these adults, these adult people who like to play on our episode today.
Yeah, play is not just for kids, it's for adults too. And it's an important part of creativity and innovation. And we have some playful artists with us today. Should we jump deep into this conversation and let our guests introduce themselves?
Absolutely. I would love to meet all of them.
Fantastic. Emily Rayburn, welcome back to the Learning Vibes podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And just for all our listeners, Emily has been with us before. She actually was on our very first episode of the Learning Vibes podcast about the creative process. So if any listeners are interested in revisiting that discussion to hear more from Emily, please reach out to us. Emily, would you just remind us who you are and what you do and where you are in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Emily Rayburn, and I am the founder and artistic director of a modern contemporary dance company called Hot Crowd, which is based in Chicago. We've been around for almost 4 years, so we're hanging in there, and we perform, throughout the Midwest. We host workshops, we have open company classes, and we are again, a professional modern contemporary dance company, and we just create new work seasonally and perform it and have a great time doing that. So that's my main artistic project, is with my company, and then taking class and dancing when I can.
Fantastic. And having seen some of your company's work, I can attest that it's really interesting and captivating stuff. So I'm glad you're here. Rachel Brady, it's nice to have you as a guest on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I mainly am a director of a dance program here in Alton. I have a degree in dance and I've danced professionally. As I've gotten older, I'm trying to create more opportunities in the community for adult dancers like myself. It's a small town we live in, so it's in need of a little more dance.
You can never have too much dance.
I don't think so.
Well, I'm glad you're here, Rachel. And if my other guests will forgive this statement, my favorite guest on this episode, my daughter, Emma Knowlton. Hi, Emma.
Hi.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are in the world and what you're doing these days?
Yeah, this fall I'll be a senior BFA dance major at Southeast Missouri State University. I'm also pursuing minors in fine arts entrepreneurship and management. So I just plan on finishing my senior year strong, and hopefully after graduation I'll be dancing with a dance company.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being a guest.
Thank you for having me.
And Scott Brady, welcome to the Learning Vibes podcast.
Thanks, Dave.
It is Brady, right? Did I get that
It
right?
is. Yeah, like the Brady Bunch. Real easy to remember.
Very good. Well, Scott, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I am primarily a second grade teacher here at the Alton Public School System. I've been doing that for about 13 years. I do have a degree in theater from SIU Edwardsville from the 90s. So back in the 90s, I worked with some companies in St. Louis Brack Repertory Company, Muni First Stage, some other companies as an actor. Kind of took a break from that from a while. there's a company that works out of Jacoby here in Alton called Bankside Repertory Theater Company, which I've been doing some things with last couple years when I can. But also kind of was interested in music, so self-taught musician, but learned from many people that I played with over the last 25 years and picked up some things along the way, and have also performed music around different venues. And I get to share all of these experiences here with my lovely wife, Rachel, and and coming up with all these crazy ideas together.
Very good. Well, I'm so glad you all are here. And Annie, you can probably tell from just the introductions that we've got a very creative and innovative group of guests today.
Absolutely. And I feel like they're much after my own heart. I am a former dancer. I like to say I'm still currently dancing, but let's be honest, adult life sometimes gets in the way. But this is really exciting to have this conversation.
And Annie, just to set up this discussion a little bit, and to bring our guests in, you and I have been talking for a while on having an episode on the need for adults to play, but we were struggling with who to have as guests. And recently, there was an event at the Jacoby Arts Center in Alton, Illinois, called an artist grab bag. And I'm going to let Rachel or Scott talk about that in a second, because they sort of, dreamed up this idea and set it up. But as I was at the grab bag watching all of this unfold, it just struck me, this is adults at play, and the type of play that can elevate our learning and our sense of artistry. And so I thought, who better to have on than these folks? Rachel or Scott, could you just kind of start us out by telling us about the grab bag and describing, I would never be able to do it justice. What is the artist grab bag? What's the purpose of it? Tell us a little about that.
I can't remember exactly how. It was just something, we dreamed up. A way for us to still be expressing ourselves. As an older adult dancer, yes, life still gets in the way. I'm lucky to be able to teach students, but I wanted to be dancing for myself a little bit more. Honestly, I think that's part of, and you too, to be able to express. I don't know. How did it all start?
I mean, to be clear, it's not a completely original idea. This is something that's been done for decades. And it has an element of improv to it. And it also, I think we were just kind of curious when we started, was not to have the improv involved, to make it, what if we just took a minute of dance and a minute of music or a minute of spoken word? They don't mix together, possibly. We didn't know. We just thought, well, what would happen if you just kind of put those together and to see if it would work? And so that's kind of like how it started. And it was a couple years that we really were kind of trying to figure out how would this really work? How could we work this out? Playing around with some different ways. And it wasn't till we've done it once a month down at Jacoby for, I think we've done 3 of them now. And over the 3 or 4 that we've done there, with the people that have been coming and sharing their creativity and their talent and their ideas, we've kind of all worked together, and it's kind of starting to take more of a shape. But I think it started off as just a little bit of like self-indulgent of like, let me just have a time to do what I want to do and not worry about an audience or worry about a performance. Let's just express ourselves.
It's very self-indulgent, I think.
there is an element of that. But it was also a little curiosity of like, if you had a minute of choreography that I've never seen, and I have a minute of music that you have no idea what it is, could that work together? Could that work together? So it kind of starts off with, you come in with a piece, but then it does evolve into like an improv.
It's turned into mostly improv now. So that's
Yeah.
okay.
And part of it was, and don't let me get this wrong because I've only attended one of them, but wasn't like one of the activities you just started pulling ideas out of a hat and artists would get on the stage and work together around that idea? Remind me what that particular activity was.
Well, the pulling from that was the grab bag idea that we had. So here's your bag of people that have a minute of set choreography of dance. Here's people that have a minute of music. Here's people that have a minute of spoken word. So pull from, and then there's your combination. Does it work? Does it not work? Just something to watch and play with. But so I think we did that a little bit, but I don't think there was much set.
No, but
choreography.
through the playing with it over the couple times we did it, we kind of figured out, well, we could do a game where it's just, we call it like a blind draw, where like what Rachel just said, we're going to pick a dancer, we're going to pick a musician, and you guys just go together. But then we started saying, well, what if we did it the same way, but give them a word to use instead of the minute of choreography or a minute of spoken word that they came to the event with. You don't have anything. We're just going to put you up there, but we're going to throw out a word, and then the artists make whatever they want from whatever that word means to them, and we kind of see what happens.
Yeah, so there were parts of this, for instance, where on the stage there was a violinist who I presume was just sort of playing wherever his heart took him. And then at the same time, Scott, if I remember correctly, you were reading from a Jack Kerouac novel, just inserting phrases where it felt right.
Yeah.
And then Rachel, Emily, Emma, and others were adding movement and dance to it. And it all was just kind of unplanned. Am I characterizing this right?
Yeah, and that was actually something that came from doing the workshops with the other people involved. And we thought, when we kind of ended up calling it a drop in, drop out, where we start with two people, and it was probably Evan, who has been to every one of these playing his violin. He's love having him. He's very talented. So I think it probably started off with Evan playing music and I was reading. But the game, if we could call it that, was the drop in, drop out, which meant we'd start, and whoever else was involved, once you feel like you want to go up there, you can go in and do your thing. And if you want to drop out, you can drop out, and it kind of morphs and takes a different shape. And it is interesting to see when you get different people up there, how the piece will change.
Yeah.
And I think this is really kind of listening to this is really that characteristic of play, right? And so in one of our very, very first podcasts, when Dave and I were just getting started and we're talking about this, one of the things that I said, and that I do in a lot of trainings with teachers, is you'll ask a group of fifth graders, raise your hand if you're a dancer, raise your hand if you're an artist, raise your hand if you're,
Annie, you're freezing.
Play, they're all going to raise their hand.
Annie,
ask a group of the professionals.
Annie, you're freezing a whole lot, so we missed most of that. We got to the point of you talking about when you do trainings with teachers, and then.
Yep. Am I still freezing?
No, it seems better now.
Yeah, I was off my Wi-Fi, sorry. I didn't realize it. So when I do trainings with teachers, I say, how many of you, if you ask a group of 5-year-olds, how many of you are artists? How many of you are dancers? How many of you play? Every single one of their hands goes up. If you ask a group of middle schoolers, you'll see less. And then you ask a group of adults, and it's like only the professionals will raise their hand. I am not, who among you play? You'll have the people who are artists raise their hand. You'll have the people who are dancers. And so I think hearing this, that really speaks to that idea of we really do have playfulness within us, and how do we get that to come out? And so I would be interested to hear from all of you, maybe bringing in Emily and Emma a little bit, to see how you kind of view that thing I tell teachers A group of 5-year-olds, everyone's a dancer, everyone's an artist, everyone is a drawer, everyone has creativity. But then you ask a group of adults and you have 1 in a group, or you have 5 in a group. And so if that's something that you've experienced in your life and in your profession.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, well, it kind of sparks the question. I'm like, well, because I have been the person to raise my hand. I'm like, yes, I play. Yes, I experiment and I practice and I try to push myself creatively. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, why don't people raise their hands? Why are they scared to raise their hands? Are they embarrassed, or do they feel like their skills, you know, are stuck? Do they feel like they don't match up to others? So that's kind of my main thought listening to that kind of statement, is like, well, why do people feel like they don't have a playful side, or that they don't play regularly, when maybe they do and they don't know it? So that's kind of, I don't know, my initial response is why would they not raise their hand? Or maybe in actuality they do play, but they don't classify it as playing.
I think that's maybe a big part of it, that they don't classify it, because maybe not everyone is a dancer or an artist or a musician, but there's other ways that they're playing, like when they do the thing that they love, just because they love it. If they cook, or if, I don't know, I guess that's still creative. Maybe.
But I think, like what Emily was saying, like, adults do that, but they don't think of it as playing. You might do some gardening or cooking or play golf, and you just really, that's when you really enjoy yourself the most, but you don't think of it as I'm playing. Whereas, well, I mean, I think maybe that's what it is. I think you lose that sense just, and maybe Annie can speak more to this with her background, like as a person, you lose that sense of play as you get older for some reason. I don't know what that is exactly.
And I feel like maybe it's even the fact that just the word play is, I mean, it sounds so adult, you know, it sounds so youthful, it sounds so childish perhaps. And so it's like, well, maybe adults do play, but instead of the word play, it's practice or experiment or innovate, create, you know, it's not, it is play, but we just don't call it that.
Emma.
Yeah, I think specifically talking from the perspective of dance, like I feel like lots of people that have never taken a dance class, maybe they think, I've never been in a dance class, like I don't have the training, therefore I'm not a dancer. But I think that it's easy to forget that we're all movers, and we can take a simple idea and just play with that. Like the human body is an incredible thing, so like how many different ways can I fold my arm, and how many different ways can I twist my body, and like little things like that, just exploring the human body, like that's play. You don't need to be in a dance class, you don't need to have ballet training to call yourself a dancer and to call yourself a mover.
Could we maybe go back to the actual grab bag a little bit? I mean, this is Annie, who were you saying is soft? Emma?
Emma, yeah.
Yeah, Emma, could you just share all that again?
I'll try. So I think that a lot of the times we get stuck in this idea that if we haven't taken, like speaking with dance specifically, if we haven't taken a dance class, if we haven't taken a ballet class, we're not dancers. But in reality, we're all movers. And I think we forget that we can play with one simple idea, like how many different ways can I fold my arm? Like how many different ways can I make a 90-degree angle? And little things like that. Like there's so many possibilities with just taking something like that and seeing how far it can go. And when you're playing with little things like that, or even just noticing how you're walking down the street, like making those little observations, like that makes you a mover.
Yeah. Let's do this. Let's go back a little bit to the grab bag. I do want to get at these implications, but I think to help our listeners understand these types of things about rethinking what you do as play, it would be helpful to hear a little more about your experiences being part of the grab bag. So again, you know, there were parts of the grab bag experience where on the stage and coming in and out of the stage as they felt like it, we had the violin player, we had Scott either on guitar or using spoken word, and we had Rachel, Emily, and Emma dancing. Could you all just share a little bit about what that experience was like for you in terms of using your feelings to find that way in, or a more cognitive and thought-provoking way in, or I don't know, maybe it's an aesthetic or a spiritual way in. But could you just talk about that act of being in the moment of play?
I think for me, the grab bag is kind of an art of observation. I find myself, you know, like, what am I hearing in the music or the words? Like, what is the range of the music? Like, what does this music look like in my head? What is the shape of it? And also noticing, like, what other movement ideas people are playing with. Like, I might see, okay, Emily's playing with the idea of folding and unfolding, or Emily's playing with the idea of repetition, or maybe Rachel's playing the idea of circular or curvilinear ideas. And I find myself making those kinds of observations with everything I can in the space and finding ways that I can add to that in a thoughtful way, whether that's just doing kind of my own thing for a moment and following the music, or joining someone else and playing with the same idea they're playing with, or, you know, flocking and copying someone else. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that word you just used?
Flocking?
Oh, that is not what I heard.
Okay.
So yeah, out of the mouth of my daughter. What is flocking?
So it's an idea of following one person and copying what they're doing, and then other people join in. It can look different depending on what setting you're doing it in. It might just be one person's kind of in charge and you're all slowly feeding into that one idea, or it could be that the person leading whatever this idea changes as you kind of rotate throughout the room, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can anybody build on that? What was the moments of play and the moments of decision making and your approach to performing at the grab bag? Talk about that.
Yeah. So just a little like environmental context. So we were inside for this grab bag event, and there was a little, I mean, it was like a decent amount of space. It's kind of slightly raised, like a little performance platform, and just kind of one artist or two artists or three artists would kind of start up there at a time. Personally, if I have the room to move, I will move. And I mean, music, no music, words, no words. If there's just like a space to move around and be creative, I'm there for it. But I feel like I've been thinking about the premise of this podcast kind of leading up to it. And I kind of realized, you know, when I was involved in the grab bag event, and I would say this is true for me personally in general, just like when a child, if you tell a kid to go play in the corner and there's no toys there, they're not going to know what to do. And so I feel like when I'm given the space sometimes without a lot of direction or things to think about or marinate as I'm moving, I struggle. I can struggle, just like the kid would struggle. They don't know what to do without anything in the corner. But at the same time, kind of on the other side of the spectrum, if you tell a kid to go play and there's 100 toys, it's kind of a stimulation overload. They don't know what to do because there's so much to play with. So I feel like in the grab bag moment, when all the dancers are up there, there's speech, you know, spoken word going on, there's the violinist going on, there are different sounds that I'm keying into as I'm moving. I had moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm lost and I can't find my way back. But So yeah, I just kind of thought, comparing to the idea of play and like a child's play with my own personal creative play, kind of the idea of nothing versus too much, and how I feel like I can match that in the same way a child does.
That's good.
It never struck me watching you that you were ever lost throughout the whole event. What did you do when you were having those feelings of, if I'm hearing you, being overwhelmed and feeling lost as a part of this as it unfolds? What did you do to play your way through that?
Yeah. Well, I feel like honestly, I don't always realize that I'm lost until I've been lost for a little while. Because I feel like when I move, and I feel like a lot of dancers and artists in general can like attest to this. You're in your zone and you're just going, and you're not even thinking. You're just doing what you do. And so I'm moving and I'm enjoying my flow of movement. And when I realize I'm kind of lost, I don't know what I'm moving to or what I'm responding to. I think I might, in the grab bag situation, I might step out, like in those moments where we can hop in, hop out. I will like step back and leave all the other artists to kind of recollect myself and figure out what I'm doing and when I can jump back in. I also will maybe tune into a specific factor that's happening externally from myself. So maybe I'll key into a certain word that Scott said, or maybe I'll key into the violinist and really focus on the melody or his musicality to really like hone in on to kind of refocus myself. So there's definitely options, especially in the grab bag setting where it is easy to like step out if you need to, but there's always options.
I think that's
and so sorry, I just have a question about the grab bag. So is everyone who's there participating, or is it also like a performance for other people to watch?
Well, it was really intended to be just a workshop for people that wanted to participate. Of course, there's room within that for people that want to observe, or people that have ideas that they want to throw in. Not observe, that's what I just said. Observe and comment or be inspired. Someone because it's, like I said before, it's very self-indulgent. We had this discussion after the last grab bag that it just feels good. You're just doing what feels good. I mean, always, I think you are making choices, like Emma said, making choices to respond to this or that, like Emily said, being overwhelmed, but it's about responding and observing and acting in real time. It's not that you're unaware, but still it's self-indulgent and not really maybe made for an audience yet. But I think we could get something,
to that point. I think kind of like when you're in a show, or you are aware as you're rehearsing, you're going to have an element of play during the show, but there comes a point when you have to stop the play and say, we have a performance in 2 weeks, we have to stop playing and solidify where we're going and everything. So we kind of wanted to get away from that and just say, just play, just kind of what Emily was saying. You can get lost, and that's good. You're supposed to. You might come in with your 1 minute set piece, but as things evolve with the other artists, you're going to be lost, and then you kind of find another little niche, and you might have to drop out and you come back in. So not worrying about the audience, just saying, there's no audience. That means it's just you working with the other people in the space to see what happens. I'm not going to worry that I'm not facing the audience, or maybe they can't hear me all the way, or my movement doesn't look right to them. That's a different, we were trying to get away from that sense of just like, don't worry about them. So I think what was interesting is that when we did have some people observing, that I noticed I was different than you kind of, when even during the grab bag setting, just knowing there's people there watching you, you just kind of tighten up a little bit and you're like, oh, I better not mess up. But
can I say that?
Yeah, you can.
I don't think it's a matter of messing up. I think it's a matter of, it just changes it. You now have you're in a, there's the proscenium, there's the audience, there's downstage, there's upstage. All of a sudden, you're aware of people viewing you from, you're just aware of people viewing you, I guess. I don't know. I'm sorry. I cut you off.
No, I think that's it. And you're aware of that. And as all the people, the professionals that we work with, they know how to be on a stage. They know. So when you put that audience element in there, then it kind of clicks on them. They're like, oh, I better do this. And so we kind of wanted to say, well, let's just play and not have that. And let's just work with each other and see where it goes, just for the creative element of it.
Do you have anyone who participates who would not identify themselves as an artist, a dancer, like?
I don't think we've had anyone come yet.
Just off the street.
Correct. Yeah, we've. I don't think so. No, I think all the dancers, spoken word people, and musicians that have come have all been,
I think,
experienced. And
at different levels.
At
maybe,
different levels,
but
yeah.
Still, I think they would consider themselves an artist.
Yeah.
Performing.
You know, Scott, I am particularly interested in what that experience was like for you. I mean, I know as an actor, you have training in movement and kinesthetic awareness and what that communicates and so forth. But you're not am I right that you're not a trained dancer per se? Or
I'm not.
He does a mean soft shoe.
So what was that like for you, being more coming at it from more the acting perspective and the musician perspective, but to try to create these moments of communion with dancers, people from a different art form from which you come?
Yeah. When I was reading text from different things I had selected to bring, I felt more comfortable, and I wasn't too worried about where things were going. I was just letting things flow out as they were coming. And I think that's the kind of what we're trying to get at, because sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not, and that's okay. When I'm on the musician end of it, I think I sometimes feel a little more uptight, that like, oh, I want to make sure that this is working for the dancer. I want to give them the right mood. I want to give them the right tempo or whatever they need. I've worked, over the years with Rachel, where I have built music for different pieces that she's done. So I feel like I've had some experience in working with dancers as a musician, which really opens up the field a lot more. You're not so worried about making maybe that's not the right way to say it, but there's more room to play around with like a soundscape and just making noises kind of, and to give them some room to interpret it how they want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
With every word all of you are saying, I have like 30,000 directions I want to take this conversation. Can anybody build on? So there's no right way to go here. Can anybody build on what Scott was just saying, or take us in a whole new direction as you reflect on your experience playing at the Grab Bag?
I think one thing that Scott said that stuck out to me was the idea of flow. And I do find myself, specifically as a dancer, like I find myself in the Grab Bag and in other settings too, getting into these flow states, which I'm not quite sure how to articulate other than like in the moment, I do have awareness, but things just kind of naturally continue. And by the time it's over, I have this moment where I'm like, I'm not quite sure what just happened. And it's a really unique and exciting feeling that, like, I think as artists, especially performing artists and movers, we should chase after those, not just in improvisation, but hopefully in performance, which that's a whole other idea. But I think flow is a really unique word. It's an important word in this discussion.
Does flow find you? or do you find flow? And
That's a
I'm
great question.
well, okay, so I have to throw this in for any academics who are listening. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book on creativity and flow is an amazing read. And mainly, I just like saying the name Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. But if you
Sure.
don't know his work, he has a book called Flow that explores all these things. So as you play, and so flow, this idea that time goes away, you become completely unself-conscious about what you're doing. You're truly in the moment and communing with those that are in the moment with you. Can you find flow, or does flow have to find you?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's kind of a little bit of both. I can't just start moving and be like, flow, let's go. That doesn't, for me, it doesn't work that way. Maybe for someone it might, but I think I can't bring it on with like pure will. It takes me, I would say a solid chunk of time, if we're talking time. Like I would say, it takes a lot of moving and it takes some time. If I had to give it an exact time, probably like at least 5 to 10 minutes of just straight moving to feel like I've gotten a sense of a flow. And I feel like when my body has warmed up, all of my limbs have awoken, everything's awake, the blood is flowing. The blood flow brings on the actual flow, I feel. So I think it's a little bit of both. And then once, I am warm, I have this sense of fluidity in my body. I have this sense of not focusing mentally on what my feet are doing, what my head is doing, what my shoulder's doing, what the musician is doing. When I reach that point, then I'm full flow, and it's found me and I've found it. So if that makes any sense.
Oh,
Yeah.
but sometimes I think within that, even when you find it, like we were talking earlier, you can lose it too.
For sure.
And sometimes for some of us, I feel like I am what you said, Emma, about it when we started talking about it. That's beautiful. I wish I could be there all the time. I've been there, but I can't maintain it. I think it's about being in the moment. And sometimes I get, lost, like you said, Emily.
I think that,
like I just, So, but I think there are tools and as we work on it, so you can find, I think you can, it does have to find you. So I agree with you guys. But you can work on getting it more easily, maybe. But yeah, for dancers, totally. It's all about getting this all where it needs to be. And then
I think that has something to be said for having training in a certain field, is that you can get to that spot quicker because you know how to, you've been taught these techniques, you have more in your tool bag to adjust to get to those spots.
Yeah.
But just the funny thing is though, when flow finds you, or you find flow, however we want to look at it, the moment that you're like, oh, I'm having the flow or whatever, the moment you think that, it's over because you just blew it. And so the trick is to kind of find that and just not think about it. And I think that's where the training and the technique comes in, is because your body already knows where to go, and you can let your body have that flow, whether it's through your voice or the music or the movement. You don't have to think about it because you've been trained that way in a certain technique or style. And so, you can give it up, you can release it to that flow and not have to stop and go, hey, look at me, I'm flowing,
Yeah, well, I think that brings up a good point, because I find that I don't realize that I've been in a flow state until it's over. And I go, oh, that was flow. And it took me a while to even understand what that feeling of flow quite was and what quite felt like. Like I remember in particular, I had one faculty member, we were talking about flow, and I remember at the time I didn't understand it because I felt like it was being presented to me as if as if I'm not supposed to think. And I think like we forget that flow can look like different things to different people. Like for me, like I still am thinking in the moment, but it's just coming so much more naturally. It's not that I'm empty-headed. So I remember very specifically having this moment of something being over and going, that's flow. I get it. It just looks different for me than it looks like for this faculty member.
Yeah, and I think I feel like someone kind of mentioned it, but just to kind of branch off and elaborate on it, like the idea of going in and out of flow and how, like Scott said, once you think about flow, that's when you stop your flow typically, you know? And so I feel like anything can really stop your flow, and that's okay. I feel like even just, I've had moments where I'm dancing and I make eye contact with another dancer, and in that exact moment, I'm like, that's gone. So it can really be like triggered by anything, which I think is a really interesting idea. The fact that, you know, anything can bring it to a halt.
I'm kind of coming in as the novice person on the call. How do people who aren't trained in dance, who aren't trained in spoken word, who aren't trained in visual arts or whatever the arts is, what are some of your suggestions to get to that? Because as you were talking, I was thinking of, oh, it's like when I drive someplace and I forgot how I got there because I was facing off the whole time, right? And like, to me, that was like, oh, I think that's kind of probably what they're talking about with flow. But like, how do you suggest for people, especially during this time when we just need to relax, right, with this high anxiety, how do you get people who aren't trained or who feel funny, right, doing this movement or doing this spoken word or whatever it is, how do we get them to that spot?
I feel like it's still training. Like they could go to a class where it was just an improv class and someone that would guide them to get, you know, to not think of dance as dance, but as dance as movement, like Emma was talking about. We forget everybody has this, but so many people, you know, don't think of it that way. Like, but it's a hard hurdle as a grown-up myself. Like I'm not gonna go play with, like, I'm not gonna play music and accept that just any sound I make is, I'm not that kind of person. But so I can see where a lot of adults would be intimidated to jump in and do something so free. And I don't know. How do we get them to?
No, that's a good question, because I was just thinking, like you were saying when you were driving, although that's not safe, but it happens to all of us, that there's like a mindlessness to it. There's a mindlessness when you get to that spot, but at the same time, you have to be mindful of what you're doing. And maybe that's where the training comes in, is that I know that I'm comfortable enough with my craft, that I know where it's going, that I can allow myself to be mindless, and I know it's going to work. As opposed, like if I was going to go try to cook a meal, I can't allow myself to get into that flow and be mindless, because everything would burn or be raw. Where if you talk to an experienced trained chef, they probably can get into that flow because they know what to do and they know the timing of everything. And then, so I think there is an element of practice or training that is involved to really experience that.
Yeah, and maybe not always necessarily technical training, but still, I guess it's just the willingness to be open to exploring that. But yeah,
I think the two biggest things, well, two of the biggest things that I've learned in college is, one, to be daring, and two, that sometimes you have to let go of the expectations that you place on yourself. And sometimes you have to walk into something with no expectations at all. And I feel like as a mover, it's very easy to walk into improvisation and expect something big from it, and to expect yourself to do all of this crazy stuff. But kind of like I said in the beginning, like there's one book in particular, and I can't remember who it's by right now, but it's called The Intimate Act of Choreography. And in that book, like it talks about choreography, of course, but it also gives you little improvisation prompts to help learn how to build movement vocabulary. So, you know, like I said at the beginning, little things like how many different ways can you make a circle? Well, you can make circles with your fingers, you can make circles with your elbows, and just taking one idea like that and just play with it for as long as you want to. And I feel like maybe after you do something like that for a while, one day you'll look at the clock and realize you've been doing it for 20 minutes, but it feels like it's only been 2. So I think like be willing to try something new.
I think that what you just said, Emma, about no expectations is a lot of what the grab bag is about, because when you have a production coming up with an audience, you're aware you have an expectation. We have to put on a show. But so the idea to open that up is that we don't have any expectations. We are just going to come into it with what we have and just see where it goes.
And that's very freeing as a performance artist. Yeah, we're not coming to rehearsal and we don't have to retain any material, or we can just come and play and it can be done. And it's fun. It's inspiring.
I cannot believe we are running out of time, because I feel like we have barely scratched the surface here. This has been fantastic. You know, one of the things I've been thinking about is even further, when you get even a step further from removed, maybe not even people who want to find flow in their own physicality, but accountants, engineers, business people, parents. I think even though maybe we haven't been talking directly to them today, we've been talking directly to them today about rethinking their own approach to bringing play into their lives. And I think that's amazing. Any final thoughts? I don't want this to end. Any final thoughts to wrap up this discussion?
I have a couple of things. Just quickly going off something that Rachel said, like, even though rehearsals can look a lot different than these improvisation ideas, I do think that we can take some of the ideas in things like the grab bag and bring them to rehearsal. And I think a lot of the times, like when we think of a choreographer setting a piece, we think of them coming in and they give you the steps and then we perform it and then it's over. But every choreographer works differently. And I have been in positions working with certain choreographers where they give you crazy directions. And having that experience improvising helps a lot. You know, things like you're sitting in a chair and the chair is attacking you and it's trying to run away from you. Go, do something, move. And so, like, I think that there are some aspects from the grab bag that we can take into rehearsal. And then just one final thing, I guess, for everyone, like my dad was saying, like, this kind of stuff applies to everyone. Like, and I think taking in information is an art. So like with everything you could do, you could try to find a new way to observe the world around you and observe the kind of things you do at whatever job that you do.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. We are out of time. I am, in fact, I'm going to hit stop on the recording here.